part. Let's roll. Okay, meeting over, done. All solved. Welcome everyone to Town of Basalt. We are having a work session with EPS to go over the presentation of housing study. We do have one member of Bach here. Thank you for coming. Some people in the public. So I think just let EPS run it from here. Is there anything you need to do, Ryan or Michelle? Welcome, guys. Thank you. You can take it from here. And
Great. Can you hear us okay?
not really.
That's on our end, I think.
Just a minute. No, it's actually on our end.
I can hear you loud and clear.
We have to get the microphone in the room working here.
All right. Check 1, 2, 3.
Getting slightly better.
Audio check. Test.
Is that through them?
Keep talking there, Brian.
Yeah. All right. I'll try to make some jokes. I'm not sure of those. Everyone, take a step back. Take another step back.
That's as loud as it goes.
But shouldn't it be coming out of the
Speakers.
speakers?
You have to
Yeah.
make them a
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Enough.
Usual.
Hold on.
One, two, three, four, five.
Talk. Keep talking, Brian.
Okay. Well, I just got back from vacation. I can tell you about that.
Yeah, where was it?
I was in Tanzania
Oh,
We're in Tanzania.
for 3 weeks, and it was unbelievable. Unbelievable. Just mind-blowing. So much wildlife. Amazing to just see.
because you can hear it through
see different
yours, can't you?
place.
This is going through James's laptop right there. Yeah.
Is James's laptop plug into something else?
Well,
It's supposed to come through the speakers, through
speaker
the
up here.
grassroots system.
And
Is everything plugged in?
Yep.
I mean, we can hear it, and
It's like,
What it? But they're in two different locations, right?
yeah.
Is
I think so,
Rachel
yes.
going to
They're
present? Do we
really
know?
not from elsewhere.
Because we could just get them on phone
Yeah,
on the speaker.
Could we please ask you guys to call into the phone system and mute your computers?
I think so. Let me think about that a second.
And can you get on the Teams on it?
Yeah. Let me just check and see if our, what we call the bat phone actually works. I don't know if it does. I think-
or even just on your cell phone.
Yeah, we can use my iPhone.
Can I use the Teams on the computer?
James, we don't know the number here. We probably need to call him.
Huh?
We're gonna
We
try.
need to call
Try
him.
something creative here.
Well, we've got two of them that'll have to call in.
So Rachel is presenting also.
Yeah.
Okay, let me pull the phone number off.
And we can both call in. I guess it's a Zoom, so we should be able to. Okay.
All right, we're gonna
Actually, guys, we're gonna have you call into our phone here that's set up, so we'll give you the phone number.
You know.
No. Do you?
okay, go ahead, James, with that number.
Is it on the bottom?
No.
Is it on the meeting invite or?
You want to?
No, because we're having trouble with our microphones here, so we're having you call into the phone, which will be louder.
Well, I don't know if that'll just go through our general.
Yeah, just use that number when you're ready.
Oh, let's give it a go.
We can try. What's your number?
7773.
I already screwed that up.
Green.
773.
578
578.
7702.
Short-lived.
I'm gonna read back to you. 970.
I thought it was a 5. Oh, yeah.
Someone was murdered.
Here, I'm looking at it. It's not.
Just a minute, Brian, sorry.
773. 5773 578 7702.
773 578 772. Is that right?
Is that your main number?
No, just a minute, Sushma.
Okay.
4701.
No, that's not the number. So,
Worth a try.
4003.
All right, guys, here's what we've got, 970, 927,
Takes a village.
4003.
Nice.
We gotta give that a try.
Listen, it was pretty impressive, if you ask me.
You don't get on the gavel. And is that, can only one of us call into that?
No, you should be able to both call in and we can accept it.
you think so?
I do.
Hello.
Okay, this is Rachel.
Hi, Rachel. We can hear you much better.
10 times better.
Excellent.
Okay.
So Brian, can you guys call in now and we can,
Hello?
Okay.
You guys just need to mute your computer.
Rachel, if you could please mute your computer.
I gotta.
Because James's computer isn't leaking into the speakers.
There we go.
Okay, I think we got it.
Yay.
21st century, here we come.
So this evening, we have with us from EPS, we've got Brian Duffany, we've got Shushma and Rachel Shindeman, who have created the housing study that you have in your packet, and they're going to present their findings.
Give us one sec again here. Nope, that didn't work. It's just really hard to hear on our end. Let us try one more thing. So if you want to try calling in for your teams.
Oh, Brian, I think
We can just
that
speak.
needs to get rid of the echo. Whatever you just did.
I don't think we need the.
Are you saying you're having a hard time hearing us?
Yeah, our audio on your end is better through the Zoom. So I think what we're trying to do is like use our phone mics, but mute the phone speakers, and mute the Zoom mic and use the Zoom speakers, which may or may not actually work.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
We're gonna try one. We're gonna try one more thing. Just give us
We just hang up and start.
a sec.
They're gonna hear, someone needs to answer.
Right.
And you are on the Zoom, you're gonna have to mute, because that's gonna, like, when you talk, it's gonna go.
They're trying to call us
On
on her end here.
Well, we can't mute, though, because we've got others on that are trying to hear through the Zoom, so.
But they're still on there.
No, I think she was trying to call in also. I was sure.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, we're trying to call in. With something else.
We're doing it for the speaker. I think we're at time.
Wasn't
We're gonna eat into your time, mister. That's okay, we got 20 extra minutes from his presentation tonight.
Come on, Ted, hang with us.
Yeah, we're skipping your presentation.
I said we were at time. Thanks for coming.
Maybe start over and see if it works just.
Okay, can you hear this?
Yeah, we hear you great.
Yeah,
So if you
want to go
present-
ahead with your presentation, and then when we have questions, we'll figure
Yell
it
them.
out.
Yep. Okay, cool. 1 sec.
Sorry, give us 1 second. Ready?
Yep. Right here. Got it.
All right, we'll be sharing now.
Okay. I think we're in business here. All right, let's just roll with this. Thanks for your patience getting through these technology glitches. So I'll just introduce everybody quick. I'm Brian Duffany. I'm principal here at EPS. I've been doing this stuff for a while, about 20 years. I've been with EPS for about 20 years, which is a long time, but I really enjoy what we do here. Got Sushma Pramod in the room, who's an associate with us, and Rachel Shinman, who's a VP here, and the three of us have been working very closely with James and Michelle on this, and with the BOC. We've met with the BOC, I think, 2 or 3 times, kind of reviewing and refining this work over the last six months or so, and a lot of interaction with James and Michelle over that time period. So this, what you're going to see here is kind of the product of a lot of those discussions and work, and reflects a lot of feedback and input from others besides just us, the consultants. So we're going to cover just some real high level summaries of what's driving housing need, what we heard from some outreach, and then we'll get into the recommendations, first summarizing what the current town programs are, and then giving you kind of our top priority recommendations, and I think having plenty of time for discussion. We'll try and catch up here since we were messing around a little bit with technology. So goals here are to identify how the market and how the economy's changed in the town and the Mid-Valley, because we think that's really important to inform how you design your approach to addressing housing. We did a survey of deed-restricted housing residents in Basalt. We did numerous interviews with housing stakeholders and major employers to understand what their challenges are. And then we've done also some market research and economic and demographic analysis to inform all of this. So with that, I think we'll pass it to Rachel to hit some of the highlights here.
Great. So as Brian said, we're doing a pretty quick overview of the data analysis. And so I know you've all received the report. There's much more detail in there. But we wanted to focus on these key drivers of housing need and then really spend the bulk of our time talking about the recommendations. And so we just have a couple slides summarizing some of those key takeaways. And so on this slide, you can see the biggest demographic trend that we found in the community is the aging population, which is a trend we see across pretty much every community we work in, but it's pretty significant in Basalt. So as we can see, since 2010, the only age group to actually grow is those 60 and over. And so that has implications for housing need. It has implications for employment and the workforce and growth. And so that was one of the key housing drivers that we found. And then on the other side of the slide, you see the economic growth, which is a little counterintuitive when we look at the demographics as well, because jobs in the region, and in this case, we looked at Basalt and Carbondale combined, because from an employment perspective, the region functions more as sort of a cohesive entity. But there was pretty significant job growth in the region and a really diverse sort of array of jobs. And so as you can see, we're showing job growth across a number of sectors, and some of these are pretty well-paying jobs. We also have some of the lower wage jobs. But for context, these are jobs located in the area. This isn't necessarily employees living in the area. So this is just the type of employment that's available. And then on the next slide, we look at what's happening in the housing market.
One point, and what the demographics are part of a pattern we see in a lot of mountain towns where it's getting older and more affluent. Because people who have been there, people who were able to buy their houses 30 years ago and have been able to stay there, they have that opportunity. They're also attracting a lot of wealthier retirees and part-time residents that kind of show up in the numbers. So this is a trend we're seeing pretty much everywhere in the mountains. Thanks, Rachel.
Yep, and that trend is really exemplified on the next slide when we look at the market data. And so we have two components here, the for sale market and the rental market, and they're both telling similar stories to different extents. And so on the left side, we can see the for sale market, the percentage of sales compared to the percentage of households in Basalt. And so what we've seen in the data is that in 2023, which was the last full year that we had data for, the median sale price was over $1 million. And then when we look at the distribution of sales, and when we look since 2021, so that was a 3-year period that we looked at, there were 10 sales that were affordable to a household earning 150% AMI. And so for some context, for a 3-person household, that's $158,000. There were 10 homes over 3 years that were affordable to that level of household. And we can just see that the sales are really focused at the higher end. And so that has impacts both for people looking to move to the community, people looking to transition from rental housing into ownership housing, and people looking to move from maybe a smaller, quote unquote, starter home into something larger. The inventory at that affordability level just isn't there. And then on the rental side, where data is a little bit harder to get, but we looked at some secondary data sources like Zillow and Redfin, which were showing rents as high as you can see is $5,000 to $7,000. And then also looking at some new construction, which is still, I don't know that we found anything below $3,000 a unit, maybe the high twos. When we look at that, and then we also look at the change in renter households since 2010, we can see this lot of lower income renter households. And what we sort of see that as, we don't have a direct line of who those households were, but really that's people moving out because of a lack of inventory. And so we have these two stories in the market of this loss of rental housing affordable to low income households, and then essentially this lack of any ownership housing affordable to even middle income households. And this really tied to what we heard from the outreach, which we summarize on the next slide. And so as Brian mentioned, we did a survey that was focused on residents of deed restricted housing, but there was also an open link, so it was accessible to anybody. And so we heard what we would anticipate to hear, and that housing affordability was a top priority for people. And a lot of people really did want that opportunity for home ownership. People are really looking for those 2 to 3 bedroom homes, which is aligned with family housing. And people really did prefer those single family homes, but also recognizing reality and the fact that that product just isn't really affordable in our mountain communities. There was a lot of openness to duplex and townhomes. And then we also asked about retiring, and so we see, what we would expect to see with that aging population, that almost 20% of people who took the survey are planning to retire in the next 10 years. And a lot of people want to stay in Basalt, and so thinking about what housing is needed for sort of that demographic is an important part of this as well. And then with the interviews, like Brian said, with housing stakeholders and major employers, we heard a lot of the same things. So that limited availability of 2 and 3 bedroom units, and then sort of the multitude of challenges that people are facing, not the least of which is high interest rates and rising costs, which combined make something that was already pretty out of reach completely inaccessible. And so, like I said, There's way more in the report, and when we get through the recommendations, we can also take any questions on the data. But we really just wanted to summarize how this all came together and how this underpins the recommendations that we'll walk through in a minute. And so the key takeaways that we saw through all of the data analysis was really this displacement of low-income households, particularly renter households. So along with that, a need for more rental housing, and particularly for those lower earning households. At the same time, we have this growing and diversifying economy. So we have a pretty good job base locally, but also unattainable home prices. And so even if someone gets one of those well-paying jobs, there isn't necessarily somewhere for them to live locally that's affordable. And so that also points to a need for more for-sale housing. So the question of where do we go with these needs was also a big part of this. And so Brian and Sushma are going to walk through the recommendations that came out of that analysis.
Thank you, Rachel. All right. We'll start with just a quick refresh of what the town's current main programs are for affordable housing. It's two pieces. It's inclusionary housing and commercial linkage fees. So inclusionary housing applies to new residential development, and it requires that 20% of new units and 25% of the net new floor area be set aside as affordable. I'm just reading this in 3 income categories that average out to 100% AMI. So category 1, category 2, category 3, they run from 60 to 120% of AMI. There is a fee in lieu option, but the town policy really favors strongly providing units in the project or building them in the town. The commercial linkage fee is almost like an affordable housing impact fee. So new commercial space has to pay a fee that is calibrated according to how many employees that project generates, and there's a formula that the town uses to determine that, and they're between 60 and 80% of AMI and have to average 80%. Is that right? I think so. Yeah. So those two policies they're really dependent on growth, and they worked really well when the town was growing a lot faster, kind of in my recollection, kind of the early aughts, late 90s. There was a lot more development happening in the town and in the Mid-Valley, and so those, you have to have, with inclusionary zoning, with linkage fees, you have to have development to create units and to create the fee revenue. The town's is much more built out now. There's a lot less opportunity for new development. There are still some important parcels in the UGB that we're not forgetting about, but overall, I think the pace of development is going to be slower. So our recommendation is that the town needs to start shifting into a more diverse set of tools to address housing. And so our top five recommendations are these. So the first one is this is a little bit of just refining the current IZ to reflect the market and the economy, as Rachel talked about. So the first one is adding 2 more categories to the IZ program to go up to 120 to 150 and 150 to 200% AMI to address those higher income jobs that are still where there's still affordability gaps and still demand, and supports new jobs, and I think existing, could even support existing business managers and people who've been in town for a while. The next one is to develop a program to purchase deed restrictions, so an incentive program to purchase deed restrictions from existing homes. Partnering with Pickett and Eagle County also to pool funding to do that, and identifying priority areas in which to apply those funds. One of you could think about an area like Cypress Meadows, where there's a lot of locals there. It's not really, designed as second homes, and a lot of housing that would be great to sort of keep in the local workforce, and try to snap up deed restrictions in there. The next one is an ADU incentive program. So the town would create an ADU development toolkit that guides people through the process of what you need to do to develop an ADU. And ideally have a funding source to incentivize some of that. Maybe it would rebate tap fees or some of the other development fees to help that. The next one goes back to the UGB. So that is to use incentives through the land use process, through the approval process to increase the commitment for new development there to maybe up to 20% through the annexation process. You could also support using RO units. Those are as an incentive to achieve a higher set amount. So an RO unit, you're probably familiar with this, but it's a deed restriction just with fewer limits on it. Typically it's just a resident employee, but with no income limit. So it allows the developer to achieve some higher sale prices, but at least keeps it out of the second home market. It has to be a local person who's working in the area. And the last one to think about is something that a lot of other local governments and some of the major employers are doing now. It's an employee housing assistance program. And then Sushma's got more detail on these after I do this one. This just shows what it would look like to expand the AMI categories here. So it would, the category 4 up to 150% AMI would be for a 4-person household, that would go up to about $176,000 a year. The category 5 for 4 people would go up to over $200,000 a year in household income. Back to Sushma.
Great, thank you. So I feel like Brian's already sort of spoken through these recommendations, but this just sort of establishes a little bit more reasoning behind these recommendations. The second recommendation really is for the town to either purchase deed restrictions on existing homes or buy whole homes, place a deed restriction on it, and then that would make it permanently affordable. This deed restriction incentive program especially can be a lot more affordable than, purchasing a new home or even developing a new home, where you're only, when the town is only spending about 30% off the home value on it. This will also help existing residents, with some financial assistance to stay in their homes, or it can also help new buyers by lowering a home price for them. And so this deed restriction would be in the form of an RO, so similarly limiting occupancy to local workers only.
Good.
Yep. The next program is really to incentivize ADU development. Similar to the previous one, this is also a lot more affordable than building a traditional home. Plus, when someone who builds an ADU can also you can help residents age in place by sort of creating space for a family member or caretakers, and the town can incentivize this through maybe offering grants or sort of waiving certain fees like tap fees, like Brian mentioned, that can, in exchange, place a deed restriction on it for resident occupancy. Next slide. Yep. This one is really just to incentivize all kinds of development. This is especially critical because the town is near full build-out. The town has already identified certain development opportunities in the urban growth boundary, which the town could sort of leverage annexation in exchange for increased affordability, more than what the social housing policy recommends or requires. The other way to do it is also to just develop town-owned land where the cost of land itself can be incentive enough for development. Yeah.
Awesome.
Excellent. Yep. And the last one was an employee assistance program. It is not very new in the region. The fire department does it. I think the school district also does it. This is where we're creating assistance programs for town employees, and this can prove as a recruitment and retention strategy as well. We could always partner with other agencies that are doing it, or those that don't always have all the means to do it as well. And this can be in multiple forms. For example, for renters, it can be in the form of first and last month rent and security deposit loans, and for home ownership can be in the form of down payment assistance or co-investment model where the town or county sort of puts in a little bit of equity in the home to bring down that purchase price for the
That's kind of what's shown there is kind of what Pitkin County does. They have a co-investment program where they kind of go in on a home with the buyer, and then they have right of first refusal at sale, and then they share the appreciation with the occupant. Let's see, and then we got a couple bonus ones here. These are a little higher level. Let's see, I think we covered that. Just well. So even outside the UGB annexation areas, I think you could consider increasing the IHO requirement to 20% from 15%. You already do this, but just keep ensuring that your fee in lieu is updated regularly so it keeps up with the costs and of acquiring and developing housing. I do think that there's a need for rental housing, to provide more options for people and take some of the pressure off. So just continuing to encourage rental housing ranging from deeply affordable, below 60% AMI, LIHTC stuff to maybe you can get people to do market rate with some resident occupant restrictions on it. And because I think there is, we have heard some anecdotes of people kind of renting houses as crash pads to come skiing and recreate. I don't know that that's terribly extensive, but and then just overall, I think we want to emphasize that we think the town needs to move continue with ID and linkage program, but start developing a broader toolkit to develop and acquire more housing. One more, I think, big idea. Well, I got a couple more big ideas. We've heard a lot about, not just in Basalt, but around the valley and in other communities. The high interest rate environment has really made it difficult for a lot of housing providers, a lot of nonprofit and housing developers as well, that people might income qualify, but the interest rates are killing them, and then they can't afford the payments. So what would be amazing is if we could create some kind of regional nonprofit lending entity that could lend at below market rates. I think there might be some work at the state level going on that. But that, maybe that's something that West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition could work on as well. But I think that's definitely something that's needed. Just continuing to be a good neighbor. There are a lot of regional partners that are trying to develop housing, whether it's a school district, RAFTA, fire district. If they're trying to do a project and they've identified a site in Basalt, I think just trying to maybe partner with them financially and be supportive in terms of their entitlements. Keep going after federal and state money, even though it's competitive. Don't give up on it. And then the last one, it's really important but difficult, is to maybe not lose sight of trying to do a dedicated funding measure for housing at the right time, whether it's a sales tax, property tax. You do use real estate transfer assessments. Keep doing that, but having dedicated funding just allows you to have an annual work program that you can budget for and plan for. And a lot of other mountain towns have been able to do that. I think that's it. We'll turn it back to you all for questions.
All right, thanks.
James and Michelle, I don't know if you've got anything you want to add as well, but we are all ears.
Thanks for that. I don't think there's anything from staff here in the room. Yeah, can you hear us? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we were just asked that you all speak one at a time and just make sure you speak clearly, but we can hear you.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll open it up for questions from the group here. Questions or comments?
Yeah, I'm interested to know, just for your last comment there, about other mountain towns, passing a sales tax, to help as a dedicated funding source. And I was, just looking here in the table that you provided, okay, on page 61. Can you tell me can you give an example of other mountain towns and like what percentage they've applied? Like, you say here a 1/4-cent sales tax could generate between $500,000 and $600,000 a year. So can you tell me what other mountain towns have done, like 1/4 cent, 1/2 cent?
Yeah, let's take, I forgot to bring a copy of the report into the conference room here, so Sushma's pulling it up. But Rachel, if you know that stuff off the top of your head, fire away. But it usually is in the kind of quarter to 1/2 cent range, I think. Hang on, Sushma's
Yeah,
pulling it up.
I think Vail did a 1/2 cent. It may have been a full cent.
It's 1/2 cent.
I don't think anyone does more than
Cent.
a full cent. Here.
Thanks.
Summit combined has 0.15. This is on page 60 of the report. Telluride has a 0.5% sales tax. Vail has a 0.5% sales tax.
Yeah.
I think the others are STR lodging taxes. Summit combined is 0.125%. And that, a lot of times there's some sort of analysis of, the revenue generation estimate. And then one of the biggest things that we found in looking at funding measures is what are the needs? So if we're looking at providing gap closure for units, if we're looking at providing, buy downs or deed restrictions, what's sort of the estimated expenditures, and then sort of tying the revenue tool to that, and understanding like current needs, growth, what have you. But we don't want to bring in $1 million a year if we need $20 million a year, but we don't want to bring in $20 million a year if we only need 5. And so just having that understanding, and so that's why there's a lot of reason why there's variation among the communities, but that's one of the reasons is just understanding what those needs are. And as you see on page 60 of the report, some of them have multiple funding tools, and so something like a sales tax can be a little bit lower because they pool it with other tools, whereas in some communities the sales tax is the only funding mechanism, and so in those it will typically be a little bit higher.
And we forgot to mention too that we are also doing a fee study for short-term rentals. So you'll see in the next few months, a potential fee that could be charged on STRs, and that's another funding source that you'd be able to apply.
Thank you.
Assuming lodging tax is in the mix there too?
Yes. With the recent change in legislation, lodging tax can be used for affordable housing.
Yeah, and the sales tax, like the general sales tax, usually can apply to lodging sales as well. And then in some places we'll even have an additional dedicated lodging tax. Yeah.
Because the lodging tax, it seems like a combination would be the best way to go because, like a sales tax is kind of inherently regressive and lodging taxes for people out of town. And, in order to get the amount of funding and kind of allocate the cost or the burden, so to speak, effectively, it seems like you'd use a blend. What would you all recommend for the five kind of recommendations that you have for us as far as funding sources? Like not exact numbers, but just like generally, what would a town, which ones would they leverage?
Man, for funding, I think my favorite, my ideal recommendation for funding would be a property tax. But those are they've been harder to pass in Colorado than sales taxes. I don't totally understand why, but they are. I think a property tax distributes the cost more equitably across rental property homeowners, across businesses, and I think it's a pretty modest impact. That would be, if you think you can pass it, I would do that. sales tax has been kind of the go-to in most places, because it's, for whatever reason, voters they feel like they just feel like it's easier, it's more palatable to pass. It is regressive. I agree with you. Rachel, do you have other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, in most communities, the revenue generation potential of property tax and sales tax is just so far above and beyond any of the other tools. So if we're looking to meet a goal number, a property tax or a sales tax on its own could likely get us there, whereas using other tools, we would need a suite of them, which, to the point, does sort of distribute it. It's also just a question of, who pays and who benefits. And so if we look at it through that sort of equity lens, then that also creates another sort of set of analyses for these sources. And that's where something like the lodging tax, where a lot of the needs are generated by the sort of visitor and tourism nature of the broader regional economy, then having some of the burden placed on that can help. But it really depends. And at the end of the day, anything that needs to go on a ballot, it really just depends what will pass.
Yep. You need to do a little bit of kind of outreach and politicking to take the temperature of the community and think about what do you think is most realistic.
Yeah, go for it.
Rachel, to your point about, you don't want to generate $1 million a year if you need 15 and vice versa. From this assessment, are you guys kind of able to tell what Basalt needs to be generating, or, is that another assessment altogether?
Thinking.
Yeah, I can start and then let Brian and Sushma jump in. I don't think we don't have like specific cost estimates for the recommendations. There's, order of magnitude, like Sushma was talking about, like the cost of a buy down or an incentive is typically lower than the cost of full construction of a unit. So there's order of magnitude cost there, but we don't necessarily, we have like some, from peer communities what they're spending, but not sort of specific cost estimates yet.
Yeah, it's like two ways to think about it. Like there's more housing need than most communities can afford to address. So you want to raise as much money as you can, but you still want to be able to realistically spend it. And we talked with James and Michelle a little bit about this, and I think it's a little bit beyond the scope of where the needs assessment goes, but I think we were trying to think about some back of the napkin numbers of how many housing projects how many affordable housing projects the town kind of had conceptually, in its pipeline, and what the cost per unit is on those, and trying to come up with some some targets based on that. We might be able to do a little thinking on that.
I think ultimately figuring out what the target number is deciding if you're interested in all of the strategies that have been discussed. Because there are different ways to go about, like the ADU incentive program. That's going to have its own bucket of options and costs associated with it. Deed restriction things, that's its own thing. And then just obviously construction projects are pretty limited, but that's its own thing too. And so kind of getting a sense for, let's try all these things, or that one we don't want to touch at all, or whatnot, would help us go forward and kind of wrap our arms around what we're trying to get to.
So zooming out, I mean, I think nothing on here is really a huge surprise. I think a lot of the kind of tools that are being proposed to be added to the toolbox are things that we've talked about, like category 4 and 5. That's, I think, it's got to be there. We're uncomfortable, I think, in general with the fee in lieu, just because it just doesn't really have much of an impact. Annexation, right? That's probably where the lion's share of the development is going to be, and we have to use that more effectively going forward. So that all said, we have this, and, you know, we're getting into budget season, we're getting into work plan season. I guess for you guys, what are you looking for as far as a process and inputs from us so we can get this stuff happening? Because we're looking at this, I think, like a springboard for, okay, we have money raised with the bond offering, and we've been focused on Midland, and now this is out, right? And we have some, you know, there's some irons in the fire, but now we really want to step on the gas here with this. So I'm looking for kind of some direction on process, I guess, and how we can maximize the time we have here.
You know, I think from my perspective, there's not enough time left in this year to try to propose a tax. And that clock is quickly running out here. So, but I think there's plenty of work to be done. If, for example, you provide direction to, you know, further explore the buy down program, that's going to be a heavy lift for staff to kind of create the architecture of that, perhaps partner with, you know, Eagle County, and kind of set up, you know, the parameters for that. So I think really the direction is, you know, which of these tools that have been presented would you like us to explore? If it's all of them or a few of them, then I think that's going to be, you know, enough work for us in the next year to like really kind of get those in place, bring them back to you, see if we're on the right track. You mentioned we have the Basalt Forward 2030 money left, so we do have some seed money. We are seeking grants. We are currently pursuing, you know, those 2 development parcels that'll be partnerships. So, you know, I think we just really want to know, like, of these, do they all sound, you know, pretty good, and we, you know, get to work on them.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And I think there's some things that we can do that are code amendments that are relatively cost less, and then other things. So we would take, as long as, I guess what, for staff, what we're looking for is if there's not a fatal flaw, then we'll go back and come back with a recommendation on how to roll some of this out and where we're going and what are the next steps for implementing some of the things, figuring out what the fee is, what the number is, figuring out what the toolkits are and those sorts of things, so.
That makes sense. Yeah, because it's too early to talk. I mean, it's good for informational purposes to talk about funding sources with these guys because they, you know, live and breathe this stuff with a lot of different organizations. But I believe we need to have a solid plan before we go ask anybody for money, no matter who it is. So what are your thoughts on prioritization?
I feel this is a situation where we should leave no stone unturned, and we should explore every avenue possible. I know, knowing that they won't all come online at one time, but, you know, a little bit here, a lot there, a medium amount here. I don't, you know, I think the situation, you know, when I read the packet is, you know, it added fact to what we all kind of thought anecdotally, but, you know, now we have real numbers, and I just don't think that we would be doing a service to the community kind of, you know, picking and choosing. I think we have to turn every stone over and put some due diligence into this.
Mm-hmm. Agreed with Dieter. Also, I think for the remaining projects we have in the urban growth boundary, we need to nail those projects. And I think a big part of that is increasing the affordable housing mitigation or percent up from 20. I'd love to hear from the EPS team some comps or what percentages other towns are thinking about, but we've seen projects come to us with 50%. That's great. Can we do that and more? The median home price in Basalt increased 63% since 2018. So we need to make sure that any of those new developments aren't rocketing that increase up anymore.
So what are your thoughts on that as far as annexation and those kind of inclusionary housing requirements? And just to add to what Anna said, I'd be interested in what the aggressive ones are doing, right? The ones who are really serious.
Yeah, well, we fully agree with that approach that the annexation areas are where the action is, and it's important to get those right, and, you know, you gotta work with developers, but to try to get as much affordability as you can out of them. The top of my head, I've still got vacation brain, so I'll use that as my excuse, but I think the 20% for a mountain town is probably in the ballpark of what a lot of other places are doing. And we might need to just go back and look at some other past projects. Can you think of anyone, Rachel? There might be some 25% out there.
Yeah, I think inclusionary ordinances on their own aren't as common in a lot of mountain communities just because of that build-out factor. A lot of them have commercial and residential linkage programs. And so the residential linkage is something that, you know, serves a similar purpose. And so it's not quite the same as a set aside for inclusionary, as you know, the mitigation rate for the employment generated, those can go as high as 65%. But that's of the employment generated from the development, not of, you know, like development that is coming out of the ground. So not quite apples to apples. But, you know, we can think on that a little bit just to provide some context.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And I think
we have it in our files.
yeah.
Still have it in my head.
Also, because this is such an intense issue in those other mountain towns with their 20% mitigation percents, like figuring out what they're thinking of to tackle the problem, because clearly 20% isn't cutting it in our town or any other mountain town at this point. So figuring out what might be realistic to jack that up to make.
I think that's where the shift has, because a lot of these places are getting pretty built out. And I think that's why you're seeing why we're recommending the shift to a broader set of tools. So we can't rely as much on IZ's linkage because it's not as much new development. So it becomes more important to generate funding, to look at other things like buy downs that are sort of cheaper per unit. ADUs where you can try to use private, where private money is built in those, and you're maybe kicking a little bit of incentive to get them to go. So that's I guess that's part of my answer.
Yeah, I would really
Okay,
love
and
to
it's
see.
broader, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Rachel. I was just gonna say, I would really love to see an ADU incentive program. I think that it's not just beneficial, for the renter, but it can also be just so helpful, for the person or the family that's in that primary home.
Absolutely.
I would just ask you guys, what is the percentage of affordable housing you're looking for in a town? Or what's a goal number? Because we could do all these things and it kind of ends up being an infinite chase, which it is, I get, but like, if we're not setting a goal, how do we ever reach the goal?
Yeah. That's a great question.
And is the goal attainable, with the physics of, what we have left?
Yeah, something like I think we have recommended to other clients that they set a goal like that, and it's kind of based on what they think they can afford to do, but maybe being a little more aspirational than that, so and considering how much construction is happening in town.
Just as background, we do have a goal in the master plan. I think it's 400 units maybe over a certain amount of time.
But is that 400 from where we're at? Is that 400 total? Is that 400 new?
That was from 2000 when the master plan was adopted.
The 2000 master plan or the most recent?
The 2020 master plan. I can look up the exact number for you here and report.
And there's different factors that can play into it. So one might be if we want to restore those lower income renter households that we see have been lost, that's a part of the goal. We know there's strong job growth in the area. We know that not everyone will or will want to live locally, but capturing, a percentage of those jobs with available housing for those employees to live locally, understanding current, cost burden households and creating housing that's more affordable for them. So there's lots of ways that goals and targets can be set. It can definitely be important to have those, especially if, we're going out to the community and asking for money, understanding, the scale of what that money can do, and then having some target. But I think the point is, justified that the target could be infinite. And so creating some sort of goal, whether it's just an annual number, or, every couple of years, what do we want to achieve? And then recognizing, to the points that have been made throughout, that it really is now a focus on existing inventory in addition to new. And that's where some of those buy-down programs or adding ADUs to existing properties can really come into play, because we can't just rely on new development anymore. And so there might sort of be two different tracks of goals, one for existing inventory and one for new. And so it's, there's no one answer, but it's definitely an important consideration.
I mean, back of the envelope, it said, we have 273 deed restricted units currently, and you're saying, James, you're looking it up, I think, the master plan is 400 and something we're trying to get to, so it's a delta of a couple hundred probably.
Yeah, and if you keep having discussions on other topics, I'll get you that number.
Okay.
Keep talking.
You need 123 more to hit that goal. Is that right?
They can be part of the information we come back with as we're trying to figure out the priorities of rolling out these programs.
Yeah, that's a good point. It feels like it's pretty aspirational with what we have left. But it would be good to kind of sharpen the pencil and see what actually it looks like. I think prioritization was, ADU definitely is good. The category 4 and 5, we already kind of started in a way with, some, I don't call it proof of concept, but we have something out there. And then the inclusionary housing, those are the three that seem like they sit at the, more low-hanging fruit, higher priority. We can get going on something quicker potentially.
What about the buy-down program?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should continue to pursue that, but it's probably gonna take a little longer to ripen. You know what I mean?
And you have to be able to budget for it. You have to have some money.
Yeah.
That if you're gonna offer a program like that, you've got to have a little bit of a pool of money to say, hey, we've got $1 million or whatever, $500,000, whatever the number is. Say, so we can do, maybe we can do however many buy-downs that is.
Angel, you got your hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Very faintly.
James,
I can hear you, and
It hurts to talk.
I can repeat the question for you.
No, it's okay. If you don't hear me, it's more of a comment. I feel like between the developments, the new development that we have in the pipeline, we have the Salt Circle, we have the Jasmine Black Mountain development, the Aaron Works development, the South Mill, just the two units that we're building, relatively adjacent that we're exploring. I feel like there's a lot of development that's already in the pipeline, right? That, in my opinion, our, my direction path would be that, I feel like our time might be better utilized right now, looking into recapturing units that already exist, right? And so, buy down, deed restrictions, and we have so much development that's already coming to the pipeline, focusing on that, really looking to new development, to me just seems a little overkill.
Did you guys?
Yeah. If I heard correctly, it sounds like, we have a lot of development in flight and some part of the process, and, looking at new development, may not be as important as looking at how we deal with some of the stuff that's currently happening, if I heard it correctly.
And development
Recapturing,
neutral, maybe?
Development neutral, okay.
yeah, recapturing units.
Yeah.
My preference as far as where the staff's been trying, looking, again, we already have a lot of development in the pipeline. So let's look at development neutral stuff and look at how to fund that. But I mean, the funding source to me is so important. We're gonna have some kind of tax. And so we need to really start fleshing that out and doing the outreach with the public and seeing what the appetite is for the kind of tax and what we need and what we can get.
So ADU and deed restriction.
Yeah, I think with Pitkin County likely going to ballot with an affordable housing tax, I think the more we can keep our kind of eyes out on that and support them in those efforts and make sure that those benefits would also be coming into Basalt, the better. And that can help inform like what kind of a tax, how much, like how are we gonna puzzle piece in tandem with them to make sure that a tax would be best suited for Basalt residents.
And I don't want to neglect the employee housing assistance. I think what we're doing with as far as developing over at Stotts Mill and some of the units we already have and keeping, I think that's the best way to deal with that, is kind of in conjunction with some of the other work we're doing versus a standalone program, just because of the cost and it'd be hard to do that with, I think, an organization our size, unless you guys disagree.
Not with no money.
Yeah, I think all of this, you need to consider what you think you can afford to do and take on, right?
We can certainly keep that as a tool in the toolbox for if we find a funding source,
Yeah,
then explore that one more aggressively. But
yeah,
keep it a little lower priority for now.
I think so.
Briefly back on the goal that we have in the master plan, it's 500 units over a 10-year period.
So we're,
Affordable units, or what's the distribution?
Affordable units.
It's tricky, right? Because that was created before current economic times, so.
Well, and I think that's the tough part, is that the target will be moving. It is moving, and when you read through, I get the sense of, you're like, oh, none of this is super surprising, and it adds color to what we think we already know, but it's still moving. So what direction is moving in, and where can we get ahead of the game? And I think the funding source is going to be part of that conversation. I know it's not priority now, but that, we have to get the ladder out and reach for the high fruit too.
I'm gonna add that to my little box of quotes.
Yeah.
I would love to know if the team had more data or information on those residents who are leaving. Two specific categories of people I'd like to know about is, I noticed that families had decreased, like families of 4 had decreased from 27% to, I believe, about 15%. And I was curious if you had any anecdotes on that, whether that had to do with childcare costs, whether that had to do with more bedrooms, just pure housing costs that were forcing those families out. And I was also wondering if you had information on demographics, like specific to the Latino community, if these housing issues are impacting our community kind of as the breakdown is in terms of demographics, or if it's disproportionately impacting any demographics.
I think it's like all of the above. Rachel can probably piggyback on this too. Like, it just seems like, the whole valley and so many other mountain towns in Colorado, it's getting older, more affluent, because like retirees are moving there and becoming permanent residents, and they're they're wealthy, they're not attached to the local economy, and that's just been what's going on, forever, right? And then, families just can't afford to stay there, so they're moving further and further down into the Colorado River Valley. Some, anecdotal stuff, like we hear also some, and this is maybe more prevalent in Aspen, just don't like it there anymore because it's changed so much. The kids don't feel like they fit in at school. Their friends aren't there. And it's just kind of that hollowing out. On the rental side, it's just that there's nothing, we heard some very just difficult stories from some of the employers where they're finding, people sleeping in stairwells and stuff to make their next shift because there's nothing close by, or they're commuting 2 hours. And so it's kind of like everything. Rachel, anything?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's hard to make those connections with the data just because we don't have paired data points. So we can look at a lot of different trends and, extrapolate what might be going on. But that's where those interviews were really, really helpful. And it was sort of two tracks. And I think, Sushma could probably add on to this too, and we're going to take all the time to answer this. But people are either moving further afield. A lot of them are keeping their jobs locally and just commuting longer, or they're figuring out how to make do, whether it's doubling up or trying to find other housing. But we see a lot of these parallel trends where like the percent of students in school districts on free and reduced lunch has gone way up over time. Alongside in the data we see this lack of renter households, and so whether that's people now living in unstable housing situations, crushing on couches, living in cars, just moving a lot, or potentially living further afield but still keeping their kids in school to keep that stability for the kids. A lot of what we hear anecdotally is also people moving to the region, and then once a life event necessitates a housing change, they just can't do it. There's nothing there, and then they leave. To Brandon's point, it's sort of all of the above. And it's also just with some of the, political boundaries are real, but housing needs don't really respect those boundaries. And so, within the data just for Basalt, sometimes it can be hard to see some of those micro changes where it's looking a little bit more regionally. Now that we included some of that. But yeah, a lot of it is just kind of everything.
Any good news?
Sorry, I have another question, but I don't mean to dominate.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good work to be done.
Yeah.
I think these
There's
are.
a lot of really strong opportunities. I think that is the good news. That like a lot of these strategies are really solid strategies. They're not necessarily easy, but they can have longer lasting impact.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I think these are all great tools to have in the toolbox. One other statistic from the report that struck me was that in 2015, there was about a 90% occupancy rate in Basalt, and that dropped to just shy of 80%. And that seems like 10% of our housing stock evaporated, and I'd love to see a strategy, whether that's a vacancy tax or something else, to see how we can regain those existing units that aren't being filled with local people or local families.
Yeah, I can tell you that we're, the side report on this is doing an STR linkage fee to what's going on. So that's a step in addressing what you're talking about.
Yeah, the deed restriction incentive program would help with that. Unfortunately, we can't currently do vacancy taxes in Colorado. There's Rachel, you want that one?
Yeah, we just can't differentially tax residential property. If anyone wants a lobbying goal on behalf of every mountain resort community, I think it would make a huge difference. But right now, it's just not allowable under state statute. I think Crested Butte is trying to make it work.
I believe you have a resolution coming on that, right?
Vacancy cast?
No, a position, taking a position.
I think so.
Yeah.
It was in Cast's position for, yes. So you guys all just supported.
So, stay tuned, I guess, right? So I know we're a little up past 6. We've been going about an hour since we've got the tech working and I showed up. So I just wanted to see if there's anything else. Otherwise, we can wrap for now. Thank you for putting together the presentation, and I think we've been looking forward to this for a while because this is work that has to be really focused on intensely here in the next, well, probably in the indefinite future. So, honestly, so anyway, thank you, EPS folks, all of you for participating in this and putting this together. And thanks, staff, I'm sure.
You're very welcome. Our battery's about to die, and so we just wanted to say thank you to you all.
Okay.
And James and Michelle know how to find us if there's anything else. And you asked really good questions, so we like thoughtful clients like that. Thank you.
Thanks. So we could, should we go straight in, or do we have, grab a little food and come back? So we're going to take a short break here, grab a bite, and then come back in for the regular council meeting. Thanks. All right, good evening. Sorry for the delay. We had some technical difficulties earlier during our work session, looking at a housing study presentation, but here we are now, August 13th, for our regular council meeting. Just before we take the roll, just remind everybody, if you are interested in joining via Zoom so you can interact more, you can go to basalt.net, click on the agendas and minutes tab, and then there you'll find the packet for August 13th, and within that packet, there'll be meeting instructions and a Zoom link. So pretty straightforward. And that is that. So Pam, if you will, please call the roll.
Absolutely. Let's begin with Angela Anderson.
Here.
Rick Stevens.
Here.
Hannah Berman.
Here.
Angel Dupre-Bouchard.
Here.
Thank you. Ryan Slack.
Here.
David Knight.
Here.
Dieter Schindler.
Here.
The A-team is present, sir. Thank you.
All right, so next item up is our consent agenda. So I'll go through that. We have item 2A, minutes from July 23rd, 2024. Item 2B, reappointment of Planning and Zoning Commissioner member, reappointment of Eric Vodzik to P&Z for a 3-year term to expire August 13th, 2027. Thank you for all you do. Appreciate you coming out tonight. And continuation to September 10th, 2024. Continued public hearing and first reading ordinance number 11, 2024. An ordinance of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado approving a minor subdivision, slope review, community housing review, and site plan review to subdivide 168 Original Road into 2 lots with the construction of a new single-family residence, Basalt, Colorado. Item 2D, continue to August 27th, 2024, public hearing and first reading ordinance number 12, series of 2024, an ordinance of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado approving special review, site plan review, mixed-use parking reduction, and PUD amendment at 298 Park Avenue to convert 3-bedroom units to 6 one-bedroom units at 298 Park Avenue. So I would entertain a motion unless someone wants to pull one of those items off the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
Then moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next up, we have a call to the public. We do have one item with the public hearing later on, item 7B. So if you're going to speak about that, wait to that period, if you don't mind. Other than that, please limit comments to 3 minutes and address your public comments directly to me. Identify yourself by name and address making comments, and please be sure to sign in at the back of the room. Comments should be courteous, civil, and constructive, and we will make no decision nor take action except to direct the town manager. So with that, I will open it up for public comments. Laura?
Thank you. Laura Main, 165 Midland Avenue. So I don't know if you've looked closely at the plans for in front of my building for the Midland Avenue streetscape recently. Catherine nicely sent me a copy, and honestly, I was surprised and kind of concerned about the plans. The plan shows fixed trash cans literally right next to dining tables that I've put in. 3 years ago, we put in flagstone pads for dining tables, and it's a really, really beautiful place to be, but I would just like to suggest that not the best place for a public trash can and recycling center. Then next to that, there are 5 bike racks at an angle. We already have a bike rack, but that we bought, but so there's 5 bike racks there. And then on the other side of my entryway, right up against my fence, are 11 WeCycle charging stations with advertisements and solar panels. And so if you look at that from any of my seating in the garden, it's going to look terrible. So if someone is coming to my restaurant from my parking, they have to go around trash recycling, around 5 bike racks, and then inside. And then again, if you're sitting inside, you're looking out, you're looking right at a WeCycle bike station. And I would suggest that a WeCycle bike station, charging station, is a much more appropriate located near mass transit and not in the middle of town. The area in front of my restaurant is really the shadiest spot on Midland Avenue. And I notice a lot of chairs and pretty things out, but it's in the blazing sun. And so, again, I would encourage you to look at this plan and realize that people don't want to sit in the sun facing traffic. Like if you're going to put chairs or whatever, I would encourage you to do that in the shade instead of in the sun facing traffic. I do kind of feel like other restaurants and businesses are getting space in front of their businesses for seating, for displaying their products and that kind of thing. And we're getting bike racks and trash. I encourage you to not proceed in just to get it done, right? Let's, to the last minute, please evaluate these decisions, because none of these does it show what you're planning. So again, please, in front of my building, which is a pretty central spot, you have to admit, in Midland Avenue, shady, pleasant, I've created a pleasant place, just give me 2 more seconds, to reevaluate what you're putting there, because I feel like I've got trash and storage, and that's what you're putting in front of my business. So thanks for your time.
Appreciate the comments. Anyone else? All right, we'll move on to mayor and council comments and reports. What do y'all have?
I'd just like to report up at Rudai, they found 4 mussel boats so far. So less than in previous seasons, but still good that we're finding them. I think there was also a report that I think some people have seen that they have found mussels in the Colorado River, which is a little scary, but so just be wary out there, wash your gear, and yeah, make sure to check your boat when you're going into different lakes.
I wanted to thank Greg and the team. The National Night Out was awesome. There's so many families, kids, people running around fire trucks and cop cars. It was great, so thank you.
And Alice had an additional shout out by name for Nino for
Cutest baby at the venue.
yeah, it's being the ringleader organizer of the whole thing. It was really cool to see, everybody there, but you guys in full force with, you're completely staffed up, which I think was the first one. It's been like that, so that's pretty cool to see everybody out there. And thanks for letting the scouts participate. I know they had a really good time, and the troop came in addition to the pack, which was cool. And also congrats on, I think we haven't had a meeting since the big Future Birds concert, but that was like the shakedown concert, shakedown as in sailing boat shakedown of like a big crowd. So really happy to see that go as well as it did from the PD and planning and everybody. So well done. Any other comments or before we move on? All right, Ryan.
I just really have one thing. Chief asked me to remind you all of the Citizens Police Academy, but of course, council members are welcome to join too if you have the time and the desire. They're changing it up a little bit this time around. It had been on the weekends. And they're going to try it this time on Thursday evenings from 6 to 8 p.m. Just trying to accommodate different schedules, hopefully to get some new faces. And that'll be for about 2 months, so it goes from September 5th to November 7th. So just reach out to Chief if you have any interest, or if you have neighbors, friends, family, whatever. They can get in contact through the PD.
It's really good. I did it a couple years ago. Encourage you all. Cool. Well, let's move on to, we have item 6A, BPAC work plan presentation, and Michelle and Sarah.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. It's been a long hour already, but Presenting the BPAC work plan and accomplishments with me is Sarah Dolly, Senior Planner, and Josh Mueller, our Chair of BPAC. Super exciting. And we're going to present the 2024 accomplishments and 2025 work plan. Next slide. So, our other members of BPAC include Karen Andrade, Liz Bell, Brett White, Jack Trimleff, Stephanie Gale, Chris Mullen, and Hudson McNamee. We've got a really robust group this year. It's exciting. You can see here on this slide the cover of the 2020 Basalt Master Plan. Cool, thanks. And what you'll see is that BPAC, the work through BPAC, is based on the Master Plan Goal 4, which is to enlarge and improve Basalt's arts identity that considers its place in the valley and in the world. So throughout the presentation, you'll see these little boxes kind of in that shape, and those are references to documents in the Basalt Master Plan. Next slide, yep. So in 2024, BPAC was really charged with creating an arts capital improvement plan, murals and sculptures, and BPAC grants. And then on the kind of on the wings and in the background, they've been reviewing the Midland Avenue Streetscape for opportunities, the Willits Lane Connectivity and Wayfinding Plan for opportunities, and kind of keeping a pulse on the programming and other opportunities besides the concerts in the River Park. So one of our really exciting accomplishments in 24 were the BPAC grants. We had $65,000 to distribute. And we had over $71,000 in requests from, I wrote myself a note, from 13 applications. So we had requests that exceeded our budget, which was a first. It was super exciting. And so I'll let Sarah and Josh talk about any of these really fun recipients, because these were really well received throughout the community, and just to kind of highlight a couple, if you will.
Of course. Sort of the first one was the Aspen Choral Society concert that was held at the grade school. It was just an incredible concert put on with a massive vocal group and accompanied by a fairly full orchestra. And it was just incredible to see that auditorium basically filled to the brink with local community members coming together and sharing in this experience. And the same goes with so many of these other grant recipients. Seeing the community come together and have these shared experiences with art and develop relations across different groups within the community. It's just really magical to see. And it was great this year talking with the applicants as well, to just see everyone's determination and passion for their projects, and being able to assist in those endeavors and really take them from pastimes to these really incredible experiences for everyone has been amazing.
I'll say, I did have the opportunity to attend a few of these events, and what I thought it was really, really wonderful is just the breadth of the arts that they covered this year. You had the performing arts, you had specifically musical. We had some that were targeting, very small children and, welcoming community members, and it was really kind of an all-inclusive type. If you go down the list, it really includes so many aspects of our community. What I really was impressed by the BPAC this year is their desire and passion to really take this amount of money and make it go further. And it was really, really impactful. BPAC took a lot of time and created just more advanced criteria than they ever had before, and kind of split into categories of things that, you know, maybe are recurring but are being enhanced, which we really didn't get much of. Most everything was new. So it was a lot of thought that the BPAC put into this project, and I'm just really proud of the organization and what, you know, the committee and what they were able to accomplish with, you know, not a small amount of money, but for this many things to get funded, really, really impressive.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just noticed that the world famous falcon is in the photo. I didn't notice that earlier.
Yeah, there's my daughter. She did engage with the Earthbeat Choir, which is a lot of fun. I think Ryan, your daughter, was there as well. It was
Great performance.
it was something to see.
I know, we heard Aspen Dance Connection brought Mr. Tapp to the library, and apparently there were over 100 kids participating and watching Mr. Tapp, so that must have just been the coolest thing.
They're used to about
see,
20 in attendance.
And some of you might have, and some of you might have heard the Rock and Roll Academy playing on opposite Fridays of our local vocals. They were playing on the Lions Park stage, and then they would go over to Willits and we would switch. So that was another new, just a lot of really cool, far-reaching impact this year, so pretty neat. On our next slide, we have murals and sculptures. BPAC really recognized art opportunities through challenges. In 2023, with phase 1 of the Midland project, BPAC hosted a mural competition to bring visitors into town during construction. The winner installed a mural this past May at the pool, which hopefully a lot of you have seen. And then in the Giselle Few Skate Park, an expired cottonwood tree became an opportunity for a sculpture there as well, which has been well received so far. And then, of course, just kind of getting a little more publicity out there. We were recognized by the Carbondale Arts Council, who helped us make the connection to get that awesome elk hair caddisfly sculpture. So great first steps. And our next one. So BPAC has been really committed and kind of doing this heavy lift of drafting a capital arts improvement plan. And this will be a guiding document for future investments, accepting donations, crafting a consignment program, supporting our partners, and eventually modeling a financial plan for the arts in our community. The group has finished defining the concepts of the plan, and currently staff is working to put all of that together in a document. And it's just been a really surprisingly joyful and fun, but hard exercise. So really credit this group for doing that. For the 2025 work plan, a lot of that is just putting that capital improvement plan into play. So continuing to build on the success of the grants, finding places to install and look for art to go in, and then also looking for ways to kind of bridge the quiet seasons, if you will, here in Basalt. So looking at some seasonal winter installations, and just getting more creative with some of the things we have. We're excited also to figure out ways that art can be placed and used as a placemaking and a kind of a driver for Midland Streetscape and Willits Lane. So all fun things to go there, nothing concrete to show you, but that's part of the joy because we come back with that next year. A lot of this will be kind of heavy lifting and paperwork, if you will, in the beginning of the year, and then you'll get to see the fruits of the call to artists and all of those things later in the year, probably spring through fourth quarter. So that's how we're thinking of it, or that's how I have to think of it. That's the unartsy part. And that, unless I missed anything, anything to add?
I think so.
There we are. Happy to take any
Cool,
questions or suggestions.
What questions, comments do you guys have?
Keep up the good work.
Yeah. My son's a beneficiary of an art program that was initiated here in Basalt and has made quite a career for himself, so he's not getting an allowance from me anymore, so it's pretty cool. But one of the things that strikes me about Midland Avenue is the grade changes that occurred out there to get the drainage to flow to the middle of the road has opened up the visual statement that the buildings make. And I just want to be cognizant, and you guys be aware too, of possibly overwhelming that art, building art and architecture in the town that we live in, with too much stuff at street level. It could distract from that, because literally I felt like the buildings got 3 or 4 feet taller in this first section as the grade dropped, and the cars became lower profile and the pedestrians were up higher, and you actually could see into the upper stories a little bit without looking right over the top of all the stuff that was going on. It's pretty cool. I don't think I didn't think that was intended in the design, but it seems like it turned out that way. So just kind of keeping that in mind. It's really awesome.
That's good feedback.
Pretty big change. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for all the work. I appreciate the performing arts element being in there, in addition to the visual arts is really cool. And then I like the integrative approach, having, with Midland and with the Willits wayfinding or Willits Lane connectivity. I think that's cool. I think we should look for more opportunities to do that in a tasteful, aesthetically pleasing, artistic way, because that's your thing is art. So, but I think there's probably more opportunities, and you guys should explore them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're really fortunate to have this work going on at the same time, and creating a lot of opportunities to integrate art into the community, and then looking at that in Willits and throughout town, and especially promoting those performance arts and those ones that are experiential. So we really appreciate it. Everyone has fun.
Yeah, it's really cool that the kids get to do the Rock and Roll Academy concerts and stuff. Because when you're a kid in a garage, it's super cool stuff that you guys should keep doing it.
Yeah.
That was something that I was really impressed by this last year or two of the newer BPAC members, of just breathing new life into these things and thinking of ways to invigorate the arts, looking really into the performing arts in a way that we haven't before. It's been a fun few years since I've been working with the town on the BPAC board. It's been great.
Yeah, that's neat. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate all the work, and keep at it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think we're going now from right brain to left brain, if I recall. Item 6B, second quarter 2024 financial review with Doug.
Yeah, right. Well, I have some art to share, right? So that's the first slide.
Yeah.
Is the graphs. So we'll start with that. Well, actually, page 3. Oh, look. And just a reminder in the deck, I can make these pages smaller, so I can always condense it to a page, so you know. Anyway, so this is for some of the new council members, and for the former ones, or tenured ones. You'll see this is a graphical illustration of the general fund sources of revenue and various categories of expense. So we'll start with revenue. The blue is the sales tax, and that's showing 43% of the total revenue of the general fund. That's going to settle probably closer to 67%. I think what's distorting the percentages is the property taxes, since they come in basically two lumps of payments. So right now it's showing 25% basically of the general fund revenue, but that's going to settle probably around a third or so. The next big category of income is the miscellaneous other. That's 13%, and that is principally the interest that the town is earning on its working capital. And when we finish going through the financials here, a little addendum on cash. I wanted to share an idea with you, or suggestion rather, what we should be doing with some of our cash. So moving over to the right there is the general fund expenses. This is by department. Leading the way is the public works area and parks at 24%, followed by the police department at 23%. And then we have the administrative area, which is finance and legal. And then we have planning, and we also have legislative. I'll talk a little bit about legislative here when we go through the expense variances. And we have planning at 11, and then pool is at 4, and I consolidated judicial and election as 1. So again, this is just graphical. So if you actually go to the next slide here, you can actually see these numbers. The first column is the 23 year-to-date actuals. That's where we were 1 year ago through second quarter. And then the second column is representative of where we are this year, and now where we are relative to the budget. So we're basically halfway through the year, June 30th, and I'm looking at variances of revenue. Property taxes were over, you'll see, so that's a good thing. And then our specific ownership, that's over as well. It's what, 75%, it's over 50. Sales tax, interesting, is right at 50%. You know, we're really, through June, you really got half the shoulder seasons out of the way, half still to come. A lot of the revenue is still coming in, and the big money months are summer. I think summer actually favors winter as far as receipts go. And I think, and I looked at July numbers, we just got our numbers August 8th, and I saw our receipts there, and they were about 1% lower relative to where we were 1 year ago today. But I don't believe we're going to, not make budget on our sales tax revenues. We got 7 months up on the board right now in our ledger, and I don't believe that's going to happen. That's just my opinion. Moving down the various categories, there's license and permits. We're in good shape on all of those. We're actually over budget on some categories, which is good. We were struggling with that last year, but we're in a better shape this year. You'll see intergovernment revenue. Again, good shape on those as well. I don't anticipate any softness in any of those numbers. The next category, service charges. We are going to, you see that BRP HOA assessments, that's 88,000 was the budget. The communication we had with the association when we were putting this budget together wasn't all that great. They were still coming together as a group. And I didn't get really good information when we were putting that budget together a year ago or September or whatever it was. So we're not going to make that number. It's probably going to be closer, the receipts are going to be close to 50,000. So there'll be a bit of a variance on that. So that's one softness in the number.
And remind us everybody what BRP.
Basalt River Park.
Okay.
The association that's paying us to maintain the arts and the maintenance of the park. Yeah. And then looking through all our other service charges, we're in good shape. The other category, you'll see interest earnings is over our budget amount. We also are running, where's our water? Oh, here we go. Thank you, Jim. You'll see the other financing sources. The water fund transfer, we had budgeted 225,910. That number was like a legacy number that we've been using year over year. And this particular year, I went actually got behind the number and kind of looked to see what staff was associated with supporting the water department. We did more of an exact computation and actually reduced the amount that the water fund was reimbursing the general fund by what that variance is, which is almost $50,000, a little bit over 50,000. So that's only two softness numbers in the revenue, and you'll see that we're still about 73% of the budget number through June 30th. So revenue's in good shape. That's kind of the headline. Any questions on revenue before I pop to expenses?
That looks great.
So looking at expenses, there are two stressed areas here. One is the legislative section, and the other is the elections. You'll see we should really be 50% of our number through June 30th. So we're running over on legislative, and we're also running over on elections. So when we meet again 2 weeks from now, at the next council meeting, I'm going to have a budget amendment, and I'll go into more detail on exactly where we're off on those numbers.
Is that the special election we had in May?
Special election is the second election, and we
Yeah,
didn't have
so
that
that's-
budgeted. And I have the breakdown of the costs. We actually were under budget on the first election, but then the second election wasn't planned.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a budget buster. And there's a number of different things in the legislative section that I need to spend a little more time on. So I don't want to, we're already trying to get back on time here on the
thank you.
clock. So we'll go through that with more detail next council meeting. So just running the gamut here of expenses are, just go down just a little bit more, James. So we have total expenses of $6 million compared to where we were last year of 4.3. And you'll see that we're really pacing the 50% of the budget amount. So 12.2, we're really right in the hunt for making budget. And looking at the recap, through June 30th, we have excess funds or revenue over expenditures of $1,792,000. A lot of that will go away. A lot of that will go away when we actually pull money from the general fund at 1269.1 to actually subsidize the remaining portion of the Midland project. So that variance is like the profit we have, if you will quickly go away when we move that money. But again, we're on budget for the year. That's kind of the headline.
The property taxes are all in the first half of the year anyway, right?
For the most part, yeah, they're still trickling in. Yeah. Yeah, but we're pretty much receive what we're going to get. Yeah.
Doug, is the police over budget just because they're staffed?
The police is not over budget.
Well, the actuals comparatively. Why would we?
Well, budget was 2.7 and we're at 1.4, so.
Well, I guess compared to last year.
Oh, yeah, I think there were some timing differences. You know, we pay Pitkin County for dispatch services, and they were really slow in getting their invoice in for payment, and it hadn't been paid June 30th of 2023, so it was paid 2020. We actually got it sooner this year than we did last year. So, and there's some timing differences in here as well.
We did also add a position.
We added a couple of people.
So that, if you're comparing last year.
Yeah, I was just looking at the actuals, just trying to figure out why that number's even
Right.
1 point.
Yeah. I just actually went through the police department's budget for 2025 this afternoon. And we're close. We're not going to be like, it's not going to be a big windfall, and there's not going to be a shortage on the police department. So.
Is the dispatch billing and invoicing all caught up?
It's in.
Okay.
It's in.
How much is that a month, out of
It
curiosity?
was like $350,000.
Okay.
No, a year.
Oh.
Yeah.
A year.
Yeah,
It's-
they bill annually.
Yeah.
You have anything to add? Okay. I think the police department's a pretty tight budget. I mean, the chief is all over the numbers.
Yeah.
With me, so, anyway, all right, so thanks. Yeah.
On the revenue side, you've
Sure.
got a $2 million bump there from what you budgeted. They're gonna carry into the end of the year and make that $11,700,000, $11,700,000, $13,700,000.
I think we'll beat revenue.
You have a projection of how much?
By how much? I don't have that number.
Okay.
I don't want to commit to it. 'cause,
It
you
looks,
know,
I mean, it looks pretty.
I'm guarded, yeah, here's the thing. I'm
significant.
guarded about sales tax, because I'm starting to see some softness in the number. Now, I'm not thinking we're not going to make budget, but each month it's going down a little bit more, and there's some weakness in some categories. And also, rates are starting to soften. We're not earning as much on our money, as we had, and we're sitting on like 35 million in cash, so 1 point makes a difference.
No, that's the other thing I noticed is how much you just brought in interest.
Right.
6 months.
I mean, like, if you just take 3 categories of income, interest, sales tax, and the, what's the other one? Property tax. Those 3 things are like 90% of our revenue. So sales tax is in, interest is weakening, and sales tax is weakening. So I feel like I don't want to speak anything, I don't want to borrow trouble, but you can also have, you can always have a black swan event. You always kind of worry about some, there's a lot of geopolitical risk still. There's a lot of things that could go against you.
There's a lot going on the second half of the year.
Yeah. So, but I will be making a projection here next couple months. So, all right. Let's go to the next slide if we could. Go back to the artwork here. So this would be the reserve restricted fund. All that blue is our post revenue and our lodging tax and our cigarette tax. And that's obviously a big chunk of our money. And then we have our RETAs, or actually grants. Normally RETAs is the next highest, but in this case we've got a lot of money coming in grants. We had through Michelle's efforts, and we were constructing the Stotts Mill daycare. That was not really budgeted because we didn't really know what we were going to be committing costs for or having revenue against. So that's why part of the reason why we have a legislative variance is because of the daycare. But on the other hand is we have a lot of revenue that we're getting from these grants that weren't contemplated. So at the end of the day, we're going to get $800,000 from the state, the early childhood development. That's on the board. We already got $480 in, and we got basically $250,000 and $201,000 from Pitkin County through an IGA. So that 250 to 2, that's 450 plus 8. So we get $1,250 in revenue, and that was all unbudgeted revenue. You think that's great, but we're also probably spent about $1.4 million on constructing the thing. So we're still upside down a little bit. So that's why we'll have a budget amendment, and that's why we're looking at this revenue here, and this red being grant revenue, being a big chunk of our restricted revenue that we're showing. So that kind of went through that fast. I don't know if you guys, but too fast? Okay. Got a little nod from Hannah, so that's good. And the last category was the RETA. The only big RETA he had this year was Roaring Fork Club. And we had that property to sell for, I think it was like $15 million. And we had a $300,000 RETA on that transaction. So that's represented in that green box of 15.4. So go to the next slide here. And like we had in the general fund, you've got the actuals from the prior year. Second column is actuals for the current year relative to the budget. You'll see that we're all in the hunt on our revenue numbers. We're a little soft in tobacco, but we're essentially 50%. That's where we expect to be through June. You see we got that RETA, third line there, RFC RETA. We had 10,000 budgeted, and we had a receipt of 337.5. So that was a budget buster in our favor, that we're using as proceeds. I think probably the other remarkable thing here is that we're anticipating park dedication fees for some of these projects that we've got in development, and they haven't come to fruition yet. Right? So we've got $348 up on the board and a budget of $661. So probably aren't going to make that. We got a little bit of wood to chop there to make that happen. So, but again, you don't have it. You don't get it, you can't spend it. But that's just kind of why it just stands out as a variance. And then the restricted grants I just talked about, that 730 is 480 from the state and 250 from Pitkin. That ultimately will be $1.2 million. Then we'll have expenses against it because we'll basically move it from the restricted fund over to the general fund to cover the construction of the Stotts Mill daycare. A few other miscellaneous items. And then you see the bottom of that 1350. This is what we had dedicated some restricted funds to actually also help pay for the Midland project. So that on a waterfall, as we start using this overflow, we're going to be out of our next payment we make to Stutzman will be done with our bond proceeds. There will be none of that left. So it will be into the bank on other things to actually finish the project. And as we go through the bank, we'll be, at least my view is that we'll take the restricted funds first over the general fund, on subsidizing the difference between the budget. But I don't see anything right now that we're off budget on the Midland project. So, well, it's not done yet either, So anyway, it's in good shape. So we're at 85% of our revenue, so not likely to not make that budget number at this point. And then you look at the expenses.
Can I ask about the tobacco taxes? Do you think we're kind of at, or have had peak tobacco at this point? I mean, I know that seems like it's gone up, and we're like, okay, what are we going to do? It seems like we might be there. Like, this is where it's going to.
I thought it was there last year because, I took it down last year in the budget, and it turned out I was wrong. So, but you look at 297 versus 298, we're kind of plateauing on the property tax. So I don't know, on the cigarette tax. I don't know how much more we'll get, frankly.
I think that 675 number that we have budgeted in there seems directionally stable over the last handful of years. I don't.
Well, we're 44%.
Go up or
rocket up. Yeah, probably, some dips and valleys, but it's been pretty stable.
Okay.
The good news is that, all these revenue numbers, we've got like 30 different funds that these monies fit in these various funds. So it's 30 of them. There's a lot of money in the tobacco fund itself, which we haven't spent. So there's our reserves that we haven't spent. So revenue might be plateauing, but we still have cash to spend on whatever the council is determining the initiative to be.
Cool.
Nothing remarkable on expenses to note. Really just nothing here that pops off the page or causes me sort of concern. And you'll see again here, this is just sum it up for the year. We've got revenue of 3.5 million compared to a budget of 4.1, so we're beating the budget. Our expenses are $1.3 million compared to a budget of 5.8, so we're showing a surplus of receipts over expenditures of 2.1 million. A lot of this, variance is attributable to unspent capital too, and principally post. And there's more of a discussion that we could have on that come budget time. But I think the restricted fund here is in pretty good shape. It continues to accumulate some money. So let's go to the last slide, and then we'll go back to the first. This slide here, this is the other funds that are less remarkable and as far as velocity and then as far as numbers. The bond fund is just money in, money out. There's some of the property taxes get allocated to the bond fund. The bond fund will simply pay the principal and interest on the two bonds that we have, the taxable and tax-exempt bonds. That will be what happens in, December. Capital Construction Fund is the Midland Project, combination Midland Project, the Green Project, and our affordable housing initiatives. And this is just where we are for 6 months. I don't really find this helpful, to be honest. I think the more, when we look at the Midland Project, we kind of look at it holistically from the start to where we are now. I think that's more of a meaningful presentation. But nonetheless, this is what we've been running with. So I've been continuing to stay the course. Water Fund here is showing, how did that 265 get circled? Oh, okay. Not sure how that happened. So that was one of the numbers that caused me to think, oh my gosh, we're a little bit softer on our water revenue, and it's our tap fees and our surcharges. But our actual water service itself is holding its own, and you'll see our expenses are maintaining budget. We're showing actual expenditures over revenue of 16,000, so we're upside down a little bit on the relative to the budget, but I think this is principally to the fact that our revenue on our water fund's off, and I'll be talking to James more about maybe when we can expect some of those tap fees. I know that you're not directing traffic right now. It's driven by people pulling permits and
I think you're going to hit it, to be honest.
Well, yeah,
so.
yeah. Well, things don't happen to happen, right? So that's where we're at right now through June. And then the Conservative Conservation Trust Fund is simply that rake off we have on the lottery tickets. They send us a portion of what was actually sold in lottery tickets, and we use that for our community gardens and our parks area. So let's go back to the first page of the presentation. We'll talk about cash just for a minute. I'm sorry, one more. I'm
Down.
Down, I'm sorry, James.
Sorry.
In that right-hand column there where it's cash is boxed off there. So you'll see in December we had 34 million, just a little over 34 million in cash. And can you bring that over a little bit? There you go. Thank you, James. And I just have the running tally where we were April, May, and June. June, we're at 34.7. So we've actually, over the course of the year, added $660,000 of cash to our coffers. And this is all cash. This is the water fund, this is the bond fund, this is the construction fund, this is all in. And I do a little proof of cash here for myself, just to check it out, make sure I'm actually tracking the right numbers. So 661 is the number. So here's the deal. All right, so we have about, when we were looking at this probably about 18 months ago, I was talking to Bill King, he was the mayor at the time. We had talked about embargoing the reserve policy. We had, 40% of our general fund we keep in a rainy day fund. So we don't spend that for whatever. It's just hard. It's embargoed. It's off limits. And we had invested that in a little longer term maturities. We went out, basically did a 4-year ladder. And just to simplify it, say a 4-year ladder is for $4 million. You buy some securities that mature in a year for $1 million. You buy another $1 million of securities that mature in 2 years. You buy another lot that matures in 3. And the fourth is, so you can play that. So you get $4 million, and you're basically getting the blended yield of like two years, because it's half of 4. And as the first year matures, you go out another 4 years. So you're just constantly rolling the money. So that's what we did with the general fund. And you do that because the yield curve at the time was very inverted, meaning that the short-term rates were a lot higher than the long-term rates. So as the short-term rates come down, the theory would be that the yield curve typically, in a normalized environment, the short-term rates are yield less than long-term because of inflation. So that's typically what the history would tell you. So that's what we did. All right. So, and that's worked out for us, and we're continuing to do that. And the only twist to that is, as opposed to doing in 1-year blocks, I did in 6-month blocks. So I got stuff maturing every 6 months in the general fund. Now, I'm suggesting we do this with the restricted fund, because right now we have about $9 million of cash in the restricted fund that we're not using. It's all short-term stuff. And we started the first year, the first of the year, we were getting like 5 points on our money. And it's dropping now. And the yield curve is no longer inverted. It's inverted, but it's not inverted as much. And there's pressure on rates dropping. Of course, everybody, all the pundits, market pundits, said that rates we're going to get 6 rate cuts in 2024, and we haven't had any. Okay, now who knows what the Fed's going to do September? Supposed to be a rate cut, maybe nothing before the election, maybe after the election. The truth is nobody knows. But I would say this. I think there's a good probability that the short-term rates will drop. So if that's the case, I'd rather lock in something a little longer so that it's kind of schmuck insurance. So so rates go down to 3 or 2.5, you're still getting something that's yielding close to 4. So I'm going to suggest that we take that number. It's like 8650 was the number, 8,650,000 at the first of the year. It's probably about 9 million right now. I'm going to suggest that we take 5 million of that money and do a 4-year ladder and 1,250,000 increments that we just roll out, and we actually invest it. And I'm doing stuff in treasuries. So like if something comes along, you guys say, okay, we're going to use this money for a big project, and we need the money, and we need instant liquidity, we can have it because we're in treasuries. You can get the money like tomorrow, as long as the government's still in business. So, anyway, so that's, I talked to the Finance Advisory Board. The consensus there was, well, I don't know why we wouldn't do it, was their recommendation. And I've been thinking about this for a while. It's more work, actually, but I think it's worth it, because if rates do drop, it's a third of our revenue on the general fund. So I just think it's something we should consider doing. So I didn't want to just do that without talking to you guys, and I knew we were teaming this up. So,
Yeah, laddering, I mean, that makes sense, and if you can do it in a way where you have this liquid, where it's not, because sometimes people ladder with, CDs and things like that.
Right.
But if it's treasuries, you can just sell them.
Right.
That seems like.
Well, it'll be agency paper, there'll be treasuries, so it'll be a combination. I mean, it's very diverse. I work with the group in Ellers, is our financial advisor when we did the bond offering, so we're using their investment arm to actually implement it.
As far as implementing it, is the fact that reserve funds, different parts have different uses that they have to be used for. Does that complicate kind of the laddering implementation?
I don't think so.
We won't color the type of money. It's just all in the reserve tranche.
And if you need it, you can sell it for no matter what.
That's right. But we'll still keep some dry powder that's not, invested.
Well, I might go in half.
So,
You see right now, we're already running a surplus.
Yeah.
And we started the year with a surplus. I just, I hate to be, rates were zero, for quite a while. Started like in 08, 09, right? And it was like a 10-year period. You didn't earn anything on your money. I don't think we're going to go back to that. But I don't think we can bank on it staying where it is right now.
Probably not.
Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, you're seeing weakness in the economy, you're seeing some softness. So you're just more, you hear Jamie Dimon talking about it, you're talking about Warren Buffett talking about it, they're raising cash, no, you don't know for sure. But it's like, you just take what the market gives you. You don't get greedy. You go out there and you take, a little bit more on the yield curve. You're just accepting a little bit of interest rate risk. But you have no market rate risk because you're not investing in something you have loss of principal. So anyway. But again, I didn't want to do that without chatting with you guys and have it be on the record that that's what we're going to do.
We appreciate that. Right now, it's just in the bank or.
Yeah, it's all safe. It's
Sitting there.
Not doing anything.
I 100%. I think, though, that the community, too, is starting to be scrutinized up and down the valley, not just Basalt, where money is going, where it's coming from, what it's being used for. So I think part of the conversation is, are we prioritized where we need to be, and do we need to look at some of these restricted funds in a different way? And if it needs to go back to the population for a vote to change language at a ballot that was passed 25 years ago or whatever, is that something that we can put into the discussion? Because I think that's, like you said, we could be very soft and have an issue that 40% takes care of if sales tax and 50% of our revenues drift away and, for some reason.
Right.
But we are sitting on a pretty good chunk of change.
Well,
And
I think
we have some things we want to try to accomplish, I think,
Right.
in the next few years, including housing. I'm not sure where the tap fees are coming from, if that's future or if it's Clark's.
It's approved development.
It's approved development. So that pace of that development may depend completely on what the rates do. So I think there's a big conversation that's going on from here to Parachute about how funds the communities raise are being allocated and where they're going and for what purpose. So just want to get that out there.
Well, I think that's the budget. I mean, to me, the way to look, from my opinion, would be holistically looking at allocation of capital, because there are a lot of mouths to feed. I mean,
Right.
affordable housing is one initiative. There's green initiatives. There's potential for a public works police department. That's a big nut. There's other initiatives that you guys talked about and you will continue to talk about. So, you can, I've said kiddingly, is everybody wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die to get there. And there's a lot of things that need to happen.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
And that's,
So you have to have.
that's what's trending.
And it's not, you're not gonna solve for it in a year. It's like a 3 to 5 year plan and actually how you get to
Right.
these places. And I've been working with Ryan, and this will be a budget drill, actually, on actually how we would fund the build out of the public works and the police department. That's the biggest nut, frankly. And if we do affordable housing, it's like, okay, what's the definition of success? What are we trying to solve for? How many units? What do we, at the end of the day, where do we want to be 3 years from now or 5 years from now? And that's the kind of allocation of capital. And do you have a continued funding source?
Yeah, well, the key to the case for partnerships coming down the road here is the investment that the public side's going to make. There's no question about it, because it's become the topic of every board discussion that I've been reading about or listened to everywhere.
Right.
And you might as well catch the wave, invest when you can, and then try to figure out where our future investments should go.
Right.
Some of these things that are restricted, they have accomplished the goals that they were built for at some level. So I think they all need to kind of be sliced and diced a little bit and looked at.
Well, there's a bit of that. Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's 30 different funds.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
So, but not all 30 of them have any meaningful money.
Right.
It's probably only about 7 that have any real money in them.
Right.
So
Well,
it'd be-
that's just been,
no, it's a good,
spinning.
it's a good discussion point. It does come back to the allocation of capital.
Yep.
So,
Thank you.
anyway, there you go. So everybody good with the laddering of the treasury laddering
Yeah.
approach?
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. Okay. All right. So I know I had to go more than 20 minutes because I get critiqued from my colleagues. You go, love to talk, Doug loves to talk. All right, thank you. Thanks, Doug, that's good. Oh, yeah, so we have to take a brief pause for a reboot of something, right? So those watching online on TV, we'll be right back. Yeah.
So just a
All right, welcome back.
I'm sorry.
Thanks,
That they
Amy.
did.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we have item 7A, interview and appointment, Basalt Affordable Community Housing. Interview and appointment of prospective Bach member Amanda Smith-Fierstein.
Firestein.
Firestein.
Fire, not
Thank-
fear.
Fire, not fear. Okay, thank you. No, that's Michelle.
Okay. Well, staff is asking town council to consider appointment of one member of the public to the Basalt Affordable Housing Commission. BOT currently has 6 voting members and 1 open seat. Amanda Smith Firestein is a Basalt resident who is licensed clinical social worker and school program coordinator. Amanda brings the unique perspective of the mutual relationship between housing and mental health. She recognizes that the housing crisis has significant physical and mental health impacts on our citizens, and she's looking to advocate for the most vulnerable members of the community, particularly children and families. Amanda attended a BOC meeting on July 11th, and staff recommends council interview Amanda, and if comfortable, making a motion to appoint her to BOC for a 3-year commission to end on August 13th, 2027.
Amanda, do you have anything you'd like to share with us, why you want to do the?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in the Valley for 14 years. I've been in Basalt for 10 of those. When we first moved here, I think things were a little bit different. I think that housing was somewhat affordable for middle-class families, and in the past 5 years, I think we've just all watched the landscape change significantly. For the past 12 years, I have worked for the Aspen Valley Medical Foundation, Response, that advocates for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, and for the Aspen Hope Center, where I was a crisis clinician and a school-based clinician. And so I have a lot of, I saw a lot of families and children that were at the very least stressed by the cost of living 10 years ago, and especially now in the past 4 years. And I would bring the perspective, like Michelle was saying, the perspective of how the cost of living and the cost of housing impacts our community's mental health and well-being. That's where my interest in joining this commission came from.
Great.
Yeah. I also have 2 children of my own in Basalt Elementary and at the Hobby Farm Preschool across the highway. I want my children to have teachers here. It's really hard for essential workers. I think nurses, teachers, people working in retail, grocery store, the wages aren't matching up to the cost of living and housing. And so my interest comes from keeping those essential workers in our town as well.
Thanks. Any other questions or?
So how does Bach, as an entity, bring a plan to the table that brings, I've been only here just 4 or 5 meetings now, and this is probably the 10th person that said what you just said.
Okay.
I'm not sure everybody knows each other. And we experienced that, a while back with nonprofits, is once we got all the nonprofits in the room, they finally introduced each other to each other, and it became a very strong coalition. And I think, you know, this is the top of mind conversation that you're bringing to us, but it's being brought to us by this group, this group, this group, this group, and there doesn't seem to be, you know, even private sector people are saying the same thing. So I would love to see some local effort come from here to, Hannah and I talked about the library effort today. So connect these things and bring more power to the table, more voices. I mean, we've heard a lot. Now if we can get all of them in one place.
Sure.
If we do our own housing symposium or what it is, but we're about to embark on this EPS study and budgets and a strategic plan for 2025. We need to hear from all these groups. So I just wonder if Box headed that direction, or if, you know, we're looking for a strategic plan that focuses, on implementation, not a lot of stuff. So maybe Michelle.
Sure,
you can,
I wouldn't put the pressure on Amanda to answer that since she's only been to one BOC meeting.
I just wonder if she's thought about, she seems to have a big background in the experience that she's bringing, that is
Sure.
what we're hearing from is the social emotional wellness side. So,
Well, what a lot of nonprofits collect data on isn't necessarily housing related, at least in mental health. The data that they're collecting, at least so far, until something becomes a problem, they're not necessarily collecting data on it. So right now it's demographics. It's, you know, they might ask questions about, do you have stable housing or not? Where do you reside, as far as what county? They might refer to another nonprofit that assists with housing or cost of living. But I think a lot of nonprofits aren't necessarily collecting data on housing yet. So I think that's why a lot of us aren't coming together and saying, let's start a housing coalition.
there is one. There's the West Mountain one.
Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely. But as far as the mental health agencies and nonprofits getting together and specifically talking about housing, you're right, that hasn't happened quite yet.
I think it's good though, there's some of that, I don't know if it's technically demographics, but that survey data on the
Yes.
intake is a good first step, because then you can start to connect dots that were previously disparate.
Absolutely. And how, you know, the cost of living and housing doesn't necessarily, you know, I don't think one doesn't necessarily connect like social emotional being with housing immediately, but it does affect, stable housing does affect someone's mental health, and certainly the mental health of children and the cohesiveness and the stress level of a family in general. I don't think it's necessarily even thought of for, you know, to understand the trickle-down effect of the cost of housing. Parents who maybe didn't have two-income household 6 years ago maybe has to have a two-income household now, which means more costs, more childcare costs, less supervision at home. And so maybe more instability, maybe not, and maybe more stress, maybe not. So that's where my interest comes in.
I think that's a great perspective to kind of add to the mix, for sure. And this is a whole other set of data, a whole other perspective. So.
Yeah.
Well, any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll move to appoint Amanda Smith Firestein.
Firestein.
Fired
to
up
Bach.
here. For a 3-year term then?
3-year term, starting today,
August 13th.
Great.
2027.
2027. August
I'll
13th.
second that.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, it's been affirmed.
Great.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah,
We're
thank you for your time.
happy for you to be helping us and
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Okay, thanks.
just go ahead. Just go.
All right. You're done for the evening.
Geez, she didn't even say goodnight.
I'll just say, Angela's left. She's recused herself because she has a conflict on the next item. All right, so this is our last item, 7B, public hearing and second reading ordinance number 10, series of 2024, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Basalt, Colorado, approving minor subdivision to condominiumize the 12 dwelling units approved on Lot J of the Basalt Commercial Park Subdivision PUD, 133 Emma Road, Basalt, Colorado. And we have Michelle and James.
All right. Well, last time, at the first reading, we reviewed the request. The applicant, Forkfront Basalt LLC, is requesting minor subdivision approval to condominiumize 12 previously approved units on Lot J of the Basalt Commercial Park. Of the 12 units in the project, 3 were required to be deed restricted as category level units. And at the last council, at the first reading of the ordinance, the applicant offered and council asked for additional deed restricted units. The ordinance has been amended to reflect that change with 3 additional units to be voluntarily deed restricted for local occupancy. And that's what I got.
All right. This is a public hearing, so I will go ahead and open the public hearing now at whatever time it is, 7:38. Are there any, I don't see anybody in the room. Is there anybody online? I know there's one Jonathan Tapper there. I don't know if that individual's here for,
He was mostly listening for the housing portion at the beginning,
okay.
unless he wants to chime in now.
Jonathan, if you want to raise your hand and make a comment, you can. It looks like no one's here to make comments, so I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and open it up for council comments or questions. Unless, Aaron, do you have anything that you want to say at this point?
Said it succinctly, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I mean, I appreciate him coming to the table with resident occupied. I think that's definitely helpful. I would just, once again, not against you, against all developers, if you're coming to the town and you're doing something, I just don't understand why we wait and change it. I understand market conditions. I understand all of that. I would also emphasize in this housing study we just reviewed that it did emphasize that rental units are important. So are for sale units, I totally understand, but I think the rental segment was very highlighted in all of these presentations, and I don't like taking away rental units.
Can I respond?
Yeah, you can respond.
Okay. We're not really taking away any rental units. My plan is to, it gives me the flexibility to probably sell the deed restricted units and hold on to the affordable, or excuse me, the free market units for rental. So, and I could just hold on to all 12 of them and continue to rent them as well. So what this really does is provide flexibility for a debt carry and for a lot of things. It provides me the ability to sell a unit to a teacher. It provides me the ability to, sell to a hospital worker, a nurse, or somebody who is needed in the community. And to speak on developers just willy-nilly changing, I understand. I'm in commercial real estate. I know that's oftentimes developers come to the table with one thing and change it up for another. Totally get that point. However, I think it's a little myopic to say that, that is this case. We've been working with Michelle and James for a quarter of a decade now on trying to get deed restricted units, more than 3. That was actually discussed on the day that I gained entitlements was I open to communicating for further deed restrictions. And I came to the table, 40 different times to hear ideas and to present ideas. And so just a little bit in defense of this, I completely understand that a lot of developers do for their pro forma to simply change things up, but this isn't this wasn't a knee jerk. This wasn't me copying the, Walensky and Light development. It was kind of in the process way before that, so.
And I think in this particular instance, I mean, I think it's, I've stated already in other examples of this, you guys are allowed to do this in these types of situations, condominiumization that is. But I think one thing about your request is you're adding 3 RO units to what we already had, the affordable and the free market. So you're actually moving the needle in the right direction. And even if something is owned, it could still very well be rented by somebody, somebody else. So, and I think a lot of what we'll see around here will fall into that category. So, I think that was an eye-opening kind of highlight out of the report about rental, but I think we're going to see more rental through a lot of this. And, but there'll be the flexibility, like you're saying.
Yeah. And in addition, there's, it may be a bit of an old study that I read, but throughout the valley, mostly Glenwood Springs, there is a glut of rental product coming online and in the pipeline. A glut probably isn't the right word. It's very needed, but there's certainly more rental coming online for smaller multifamily than there is condo product.
I think 50% affordable housing is definitely the right direction, and that piece is really appreciated.
It's not 50, it's 25%.
25%, but 50% restricted.
Which is great. I approve. Yeah.
Yeah.
And RO restricted is a affordable housing initiative.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, resident occupied gets a little weird because you can charge market rate, right? So it doesn't make that affordable. It gives us what we want, not second homes, but it's also not an affordable product. So you get credit for doing it, 100%. But I also don't want us to skew the conversation into this is extra affordable units, because that is not what it is.
Well, what it does is when it's for sale, and this is recognized in many other markets, that Summit County, Eagle Valley, I've done a lot of appraisal work in Mountain Village, Telluride, who've had this RO product, they call it employee housing down there. And what it does is it actually does create a gap. It does create an affordability because it reduces the buyer pool. It reduces the second home buyers. It reduces, the people, what Telluride saw in COVID was a lot of people, especially when inflation started to happen, was a lot of people looking to hedge inflation and so just parking money somewhere. So an additional buyer pool, and this eliminates both those buyer pools, so it does actually create a lower price because there's less demand.
There's downward pressure.
Correct.
And the more restricted the RO is, the more downward pressure there is until probably blends somewhere into category, I don't know about 5, but somewhere if we had higher categories even than that.
Can I ask a future-oriented?
Yeah.
Where's lending going in terms of how this trajectory towards affordable housing is headed? I mean, some of the things we've heard over and over is that, well, the banks don't support the project, the mix doesn't support the project, the financing isn't supported by this unit mix. When are the banks and when are the financial institutions going to get on board with what the community needs might be, and how does that reflect on us as a community to invest in these things? And also, where does the private investor have to come from, and how do they have to approach this? And we don't need to get into a 5 or 10 or 15, 20 minute, but do you see where we can start to negotiate with these institutions a little bit and say, look guys, this is where it's going, this is what we need, and we need you to be investors?
It's so most commercial loans are actually usually in-house, so they're not sold to a secondary market, so the banks oftentimes have a lot of maneuverability with what they do. So there aren't really set, it's kind of wild west with deed restrictions and affordable housing, and I'm not an underwriter by any means, but I'm in that world. So they assess risk for underwriting, and oftentimes people would see affordable housing as lower risk, and so somebody could make that case to a smaller bank and get similar terms with a loan. as long as the debt service ratio, so your net operating income, is sufficient to support your debt service. I think some banks, you could make a case that it's going to be very comparable loan terms, interest rates, all of that. However, banks oftentimes, if there's an unknown, so they can't point their fingers, they don't have a portfolio of affordable housing, they're going to throw extra risk at it because they don't know. And so that extra risk is going to translate to, which is probably what's happening right now, slightly higher interest rates, slightly higher origination, slightly higher LTV, so you have to come to the table with a little more money, all of that. So that's how the banks are probably perceiving it right now, but I'm not a banker, but I think that's probably pretty fair to say.
Just quickly, we had a climate change conversation about the same thing, was banking, insurance, and risk management to finance startup companies in the climate change industry. And that was the big hurdle that this one gentleman talked about for quite a while, to change the trend in those financing agreements. And you mentioned the key to the case, I think, was that additional risk, who covers that? And if there's a community fund or a community foundation or a government, then that really becomes the true public-private piece of this.
Yeah, and I think, to the point of individual units, so if this does become condominiumized or another project that is condominiumized, the end user, they typically do have slightly higher interest rates. So the person looking to buy a category, again, because they don't sell those on the secondary market, it's perceived as being slightly more risk. So somebody who's looking to buy a category 4 unit here in Basalt may have to go with a 7.5% interest rate at this point, where somebody getting a typical non-deed restricted may be able to get slightly better terms, like a 6.5. That's what I've seen before.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Good discussion.
Just in terms of our earlier conversation about affordable housing percentages in developments, how much of a stretch was it to add 3 RO units? Like, was it a big stretch? Was it not a big deal in terms of your financing and making the math pencil out?
Speaking of risk, it's a little bit unknown because there isn't a lot of RO product that's sold in Basalt. And so I can point to the development over there and try kind of look at that, but that's kind of a different beast. It's very high quality. My property's on the river, but I don't have amenities, and this tends to be just a little bit better product, I imagine. No highway noise. So all those things are, considered in, so I don't have a smoking gun comp to say it's going to be this much discount, this much sale, Originally, we were in, when talking with the town, we were talking buy downs, and we kind of just decided that, it may not be necessary, but the buy downs very loosely supported that I threw out there was, between $100,000 and $140,000 discount from free market to deed restricted. And that was based on, some of the data that I cited earlier. So looking at these other markets that have a similar RO employee housing product and seeing what the discount is. And that's really, you had to go outside this market, so it's not apples to apples. But like Summit County, they see like 15% outside of the Breckenridge area and the more rural areas, and then in Breckenridge, I think they see 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Mountain Village, I've seen up to like 40% discount from free market. So it kind of depends on the population center, the demand, who can buy it, all of that. Which that tends to be very similar in these markets. It's somebody who is going to occupy it or an employer.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I would, and Angela, if you want to chime in, feel free here.
I don't really have anything of note. I applaud Aaron for, doubling down on his deed restricted commitment. So I plan to support this.
Thanks.
Thanks, Joe.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt ordinance number 10, series of 2024 on second reading.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Pam, will you please call the roll?
Absolutely. Let's begin with Ryan Slack,
No.
Angèle Dupré-Bouchard,
Yes.
Rick Stevens,
Yes.
Anna Berman,
Yes.
Dieter Schindler,
Yes.
and David Knight.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, council.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, town staff.
All right, and that concludes our meeting, and we are not too terribly over. Technical issues, and let's